Good Wednesday to you, everybody in COM 710. Welcome to week 4. Kabam. How's everybody hanging in there? What's this? The quarter semester mark? Okay. Not spring break yet, but it's coming. So in the meantime, you gotta do what you need to do to hang on and keep going. And for me, that means just a little bit more. Coffee, fantastic in the Welsh Griffin Cup. That is homage to my family roots. Okay, that's much better. Now I am ready. Dr. Jeff Gardner, your sufficiently and fully caffeinated communication instructor. How you doing? You hanging in there? Okay. Um, this is the I mean, I don't know what it's like where you live, this the time of the semester in which it starts to get bloody cold. And work is stacking up, and I know the flu has been going around. Speaking of which, my throat's a little scratchy, so I'm just gonna do a little lozenge here, and sort of a lozenge, Altoids, curiously strong. Interesting. Um, Take a deep breath. Maybe over the weekend, make sure that you get out. Give yourself some fresh air. Proven healing powers of exposure to natural environments. I won't go into it, but I should know. So give yourself that. All right. Before we talk about the readings from last week and some of your answers, a couple of housekeeping items. In this last week, Group 1, your first presentation was due. That is on January 29th. Now remember, from the instructional sheet, I've asked you to upload it in the assignments folder. Okay, that allows me to grade it. But I also wanted you to put it into the week in which it's due, and many of you did. There's a couple, one or two of you that did not, because I want other people to be able to see what you're doing and you to see what other people are doing. Okay, so if you have not, I know that everybody in that week, I think maybe we're missing one from Group 1, uploaded their assignment in the assignment folder. And then there are a couple of folks who have not uploaded it into Blackboard, and you create your own thread. I want people to be able to go to just your thing. Okay, so go to what is it, week 2? Okay, and discussion 2 or forum 2, or I'm sorry, I keep saying 2. My goodness, week 3, not week 2, week 3, forum 3, and upload the link to your presentation there so your classmates can have a look at it and we can give each other some feedback. All right. I didn't make something clear, and I apologize. On the sheet, the presentation sheet, some of your names were next to each other. It was like, so and so, and like Valerie and Nathan, your names were next to each other. I did not mean that that I was asking you to work together. I just meant that both of you did the same chapter. That you're both to do chapter 4. And the reason that I did that is we're only going to go so far in the Golan book, and I didn't want to get too far, out over our skis and have you reviewing chapters that we weren't going to read as a class. So there'd be no metric by which someone else in the class could judge how well you summarize the stuff, because they're not reading it. So what I meant was each person covers that chapter. And the same for part, group 2 for this part 1, which is your presentation introduced February 5th. If you see your name next to somebody, I'm not suggesting that you work together. What I am saying is that you'll each do that chapter. All right. So, one of you emailed me and said, oops, I think we worked together. We were supposed to work together. Okay, that's my fault. Not a big deal. Okay, but everybody do their own presentation. All right, and make sure that you post it up to Blackboard. And then also, it's February 1, and part 1 of your research paper is due on February 20th. So, keep working at that, okay? And it's all going to come out in the wash, right? All right. Let's take a look at the questions, the readings from last week. see what we have, see what you said, see what we can add. Question number one, consider Miller's living systems theory. This is a theory that's been knocking around for a while, especially in the international scene. So I wanted you to be familiar with it. Living systems theory model, as discussed by Guarente. In your opinion, is it valid? Meaning LST, the living systems model, not the discussion. Sorry if there was any confusion. In your opinion, is it illustrating or is it more smoke than fire? And, that's kind of a colloquialism. What I meant by that is by way of a theory as to how human interaction connects. Do you buy it? Okay. Does it help us understand? Remember what a good theory is supposed to do. For those who had theory class, and if you haven't, then you're going to get this again. A good theory is supposed to help us understand why people do what they do. As communication scholars, you could really boil it down to, we were after two main things. Okay. And that is, what is it that people do by way of communication? And that can come in a lot of forms. And why do they do it like that? All right. We're actually very close in our discipline to psychologists and anthropologists. The major difference between communication scholars and, say, psychologists or sociologists is that we do not spend any time clinically, after we ask the question, what is it that people do? And then we determine why do they do that? We don't spend any time clinically saying, well, maybe you want to do this instead of that. Okay. Ours is the much more analytical side of the equation. So living systems theory, sort of a unifying theory, rather than a particular interaction, a communication interaction. It's the whole big thing. It's this nested thing. Okay. Some people really like it. Some people go, meh. Seems like an attempt to overcomplicate the matter when it's much more straightforward. Or yes, internationally, especially communications is a complicated scenario, maybe more complicated than we can wrap up in a theory. Okay. But let's see what you said, Lauren. What to make of Miller? I think the living system theory model is really noteworthy. First, I appreciate the cross-curricular approach that is at play here. It showcases that every discipline can have an impact or maybe just an inspiration on the other. I think that's fair. Okay. As the text noted, Miller's model set in the framework of biology needed to identify the hierarchy of the process take place in living systems. And this is from Golan. According to the text, the same model has been referred to as the most integrative social system theory that would have great content and communication for a number of reasons, including providing a detailed analysis of types of systems, making the distinction between concrete and abstract systems, and placing emphasis on information processing. Okay. And you say if it can help bring a new perspective into how people can view or strategize the best way to reach global audiences and understand the interconnected relationships between nation states, then I think it merits consideration. Okay, fair enough. Nathan, you disagree. You said I disagree with the model. Miller's living systems theory model focuses on interconnection between multiple living systems, recognizing the interrelation between components, and emphasizes the cyclical organization of life and nature, and uses the system theory to describe interactions of various components. While it is difficult to assess the material in its entirety, and I think that's also a good observation, because it's this thing is a tad unwieldy, in my opinion. Okay. As the original work was 1,102 pages, the picture given in Golan leaves many questions. Part of the issue of validity is that more emphasis is placed on the components in the system rather than on the supra system, okay, which denotes their power and influence. Although the system works well with Buddhism and Taoism, as these philosophies emphasize the connectedness between all matter and energy, it falls short when compared to the truth of Christianity. Okay, and I thought that was very interesting that you pointed that out, Nathan, because yes, quite intentionally, Miller is drawing on these Eastern cosmologies, okay, theological constructs, cosmogonic, okay, and I'm not knocking Taoism or Buddhism, and they're closely related to each other. The, the major dividing difference between Taoist or Taoist, DT, Tao, and Buddhism is, at their heart, Buddhism and Taoism are atheistic. There's not a separate creative force. There's certainly not a trinity in these systems. As a Catholic Christian, I take the approach that's articulated by a great, great scholar and very, very godly man, Saint Pope John Paul II, who pointed out that other faiths, other cosmologies can reflect the light of the truth, like the moon reflects the light of the sun. See, the moon doesn't produce any light in itself. Its surface is very light colored and reflects the light from the sun, and that's why it appears bright to us. But better, so you can appreciate that, and you can use it for what purpose it might serve. To continue the analogy, you can navigate by moonlight. Best navigation, however, is from the source of light. Okay, so I spend time reading Taoist philosophies and writers. Some of the things that I practice in my regime of taking care of myself have their roots in Taoism. But this is very much where Miller is coming from. So good catch in pointing that out. Okay, Nathan. In humility, we recognize the scriptural emphasis that God is who maintains all things, as well as there are spiritual elements at work which are beyond our current knowledge. While the system can be useful in reminding us of areas of connection that we might otherwise overlook, it's more smoke than fire because it lacks, 1, the opportunity to effectively recognize the super system, 2, a misunderstanding of God's maintenance, and 3, lack of room for growth because of its predetermined condition and the precondition that lacks the spiritual realm. I think you meant lacks. There's just an S missing there. Okay, I think that's very well said. And you might make the analogy, the difference between and I mean sort of at foundational level between a Taoist system and a Christian worldview, a Taoist worldview and a Christian worldview. It's sort of like the difference between understanding the clock, the system, which is Taoism, and then the other one is understanding the clock maker, which is Christianity. Now, I'm not saying that Christians aren't interested in how the world works. That's what we're doing here. All right. But it's and I'm not suggesting, that, if you ask me outside of this context, I would certainly give you an opinion about which is superior to the other. Okay. But it's your starting point. What do you start with? Do you start with the focus on the created or the creator? Now, the focus on the created can lead you to an understanding and a focus on the creator. Great. And a focus on the creator can lead you to an understanding and a focus and appreciation on the created. Great. But the question is, what's your benchmark? What's your sort of foundational starting point? Okay. All right. Question number 2, according to Chang and Lee, what predictive variables? Remember, we say predictive variables. For those of you who are in statistics, quantitative research methods, this is sort of the Britishism. We say independent variable. Okay, they say predictor variable. Same. What predictive variables influence how the U.S. media selected international events to cover? Are these factors still relevant in the year 2023? All right. And I asked you to go get something externally. Okay, Lauren. Chang and Lee found several predictive variables influence U.S. media coverage of international events. Those variables included threat of the events of the United States, non-threatening events, potential for national change, loss of life or property, press freedom, geographic proximity. There was language, religious affiliation, these sorts of things. Noted the single most important explanatory variable for both newspaper and TV is that are non-threatening to the United States. I find all these factors still relevant. Okay, good. However, I feel others are not as much a priority as others. I mean, some as compared to one. I get that. For example, geographic proximity seems to have less of an influence on media than other factors, and I think that's a fair analogy. We it's sort of carrying a sense of boundless geography in our hands that is quite literally a portal to the sum of human knowledge, including places. It's sort of, this device has broken down an awareness of those barriers. So I think that's a good observation. In 2012, one research effort of the United States media found that most stories and outlets selected for analysis was based somewhere in the United States. However, the research was also able to catalog publications of foreign news stories and found over and over the course of 2 weeks. Sample 95 country-related issues were published that included global events closely related to the United States and the United Nations. The top 3 countries reported during on the sample were Libya, United Kingdom, and Afghanistan. Mexico ranked 11th, which is geographically much closer to us. And that's true. Also, another factor driving that change in the predictor or the independent variable is the 24-hour news cycle. Media, specifically news media, needs content. So they'll pull stories from overseas, and watch for this if you haven't noticed this before. You'll see a clickbait headline, something like legislators pass restrictions on, I'm making this up, pass restrictions on women's heel height. And you go, what? And you click on it, and yeah, in Uruguay, a village council tired of women in high heels or something, and you're like, oh, come on, man. So there's a need for content that drives the destruction of these barriers, and then there's the globalized approach to information that technologies afford. Okay, good answer. Okay, and by the way, I want to point out, Olivia, you had an excellent response. It was very, very detailed. So, folks, if you did, make sure you took a look at her response, and you were crushing it this week. By the way, Olivia, you were on top of all of the stuff, and you went first on most of them. Okay, question number 3: consider H1 from Lynn and Barnett. Was H1 supported? Now, first things first. Why would I give you such a question as this? Because I want you, to comfortably put on those little researcher hats and with great fluidity, be able to put them on and take them off, and put them on and take them off. I want you, as you're thinking and working through your research paper, part 1 of 2 parts for 1 paper. We're not doing 2 papers. We're doing 1 paper with 2 parts. I want you to get your mind into the mode that when you're moving through evidence, you're moving through articles, okay, you're constructing that literature review, that you're developing a good eye for what's good research and a good eye for what is baloney. So you're going immediately to the abstract. You're going immediately skimming through the article and looking for a good tight hypothesis. You're going immediately to the methodology section to see if the hypothesis was supported or not. And I think, it doesn't mean that if the null hypothesis is supported, that doesn't mean that the article is crap. No. But by what means, what data, what analysis do they support or reject the hypothesis? That's what I want you looking out for. Okay. Olivia, you said consider blah, 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 blah. Yes, H1, international aid relations are associated with, meaning cause or correlated with, news coverage in a global system. Okay, so yes, and then the answer to this is H1 is supported. Okay, with global delineating specific relations between foreign aid and news coverage, Lynn and Barnett explained the studies focus on the unidirectional influence of global news coverage and on international aid, because the purpose of this study was to empirically test the effect of news coverage on international aid relations in a global system. Okay. Shonda, you also did well on this. Hit this. The level of news coverage in each recipient country received from the global news system is positively related to the level of national aid received. Question mark. Nice rewording of the hypothesis. According to Lynn Barnett, the results showed positive association between the levels of global news coverage and international aid. That is, recipient countries with high levels of news coverage received more aid and more international aid relations than those with less. Okay, so yes, it's covered. Now the question is why? And the studies that have been done on the why reveal answers that may not make you comfortable as a U.S. citizen. And this is actually a very well studied phenomenon. This is not new. Okay. In fact, it's so well studied, it has its own name, and it's referred to as the CNN, like the news channel effect. Excuse me. And basically, what it says is that the legislators, I was going to say legislative process, as if it's some sort of foreign thing. The legislators that we send to govern us on a federal level have a tendency to react rather than act concerning what they do. And so the CNN effect is that there'll be some story that the media is blowing up, and then the legislators will go, "Oh my goodness, we got to get on top of this." And which begs the question, this is what I meant by you may not be happy about this as a U.S. citizen, which begs the question of, are those that we elect and that we, let's understand that we elect someone to any office, but in particular a federal office. You're hiring someone to do a job that you pay for, you and I, we pay for, that they do in an unsupervised place. That is, you can't watch them. So there is a tremendous amount of trust. What the CNN effect suggests is that they're reactive rather than active, and that is that those who govern us are easily riled, hyped up, and moved, to do something, when maybe the best option is to not do anything, like don't get involved and don't spend the money. Okay. But that's not how it works. And then, you go sort of one level down and you go, okay, well, why does that happen? What are the theories behind that? Well, again, back to the research, part of the theories is that media, and especially now, media focuses on what it believes will emotionally drive people to drive revenue. I'm not saying that now media is focused. It never has been. That's not what I'm saying. But in a fragmented and very competitive media market, that's particularly significant. So media focuses on and frames in an emotional way what it believes will drive people's emotions. And people tend to engage, and this means legislatures, with what they become emotive about. In addition to that, there is a significant symbiotic relationship between media coverage and action on the part of legislators. That is, legislatures and legislators will, sometimes directly, sometimes reflexively, will seek out, that is actually, when I say directly, they plan it this way, will seek out to become involved in or advance causes that are being covered by the media, so they, the legislator, become advanced and covered by the media. Because, for anybody in elected office, he or she has two jobs. The first job is to get elected. Then the second job is the job that's associated with the office. But without being successful at job number one, being elected, there is no job number two. So, take the situation in Ukraine, for example. Now, I'm not, if you wanted to ask me privately through email what I think about this, I'll tell you. All right. So I'm not taking a position as to whether we should or shouldn't be involved in what I'm about to tell you. Okay. But given the the level of media coverage, it's not surprising to me that to date, the United States has sent somewhere in the neighborhood of $68 billion with a B to Ukraine. I mean, either in the form of cash or weapons or other goodies. Okay, and to put that in perspective, because numbers can be, especially big numbers, they can be hard to conceptualize because you've really got no standard of comparison. I mean, when I was a kid, growing up, one of the standards of comparison for size was a bread box. So the expression was it bigger than a bread box? And so there was a common understanding of how big a bread box is. And what's a bread box? Is the box in which you put your bread, and that keeps insects and vermin away from it and keeps it fresher. Okay. So billion, like, what do you compare that to? So think about it this way. 68 billion translates into 68,000 million. So 1 billion divided by a million is 68,000. All right. So if you spent $1 million a day for 187 years, that's 68 billion. It's actually just a little shy of 68 billion. Imagine spending $1 million every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And at the end of 186 years, you still would not have spent 68 billion. That's a lot of money. And this is what I mean by this sort of cyclical, symbiotic relationship that takes on a momentum of its own. And away it goes. So again, now taking position on whether we should be involved with sending the Ukraine $68 billion or even $1, this is one of the things that should concern us as citizens, both of our country and of the world, is the relationship that develops between coverage and funding. Okay. Anyway, next question. Question number 4. Consider Golan's 6 hypotheses. In your opinion, are any of the 6 hypotheses revealing or surprising? And by the way, I am terribly sorry. I said 6 and it was 5. And some of you, you wrote me and you're like, I'm in the hunt for 6. I can only find 5. What up? And I'm like, typo. Sorry. Okay, Nathan. And again, back to you being critical of sources. What I wanted you to do here is take a look at these and say, yeah, okay, is this worth a research paper? Again, I'm not criticizing the author. Nathan, you said this the second hypothesis was quite interesting and revealing. Well, this is not surprising. The nation's relevance to the U.S. would result in more coverage. It was interesting in how the authors categorize this relevance to the U.S. Golan used criteria of trade with the United States, proximity, U.S. investment in the nations, U.S. aid. This certainly made sense for a political perspective. Okay. Nicole, you were one of the few that disagree. You say, I find the 5 hypotheses presented by Golan, then you list them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do not find any of these to be revealing or surprising. And now, I will say a little bit here. I tend to agree. I think all are part of all of them. That begs the obvious. A nation's, H4, a nation's religious affinity with the United States is positively associated with coverage of that nation by U.S. television and news programs. Okay. Because, people with religious affiliation tend to be engaged with media. So why wouldn't it be? Okay. Nicole, so you're right. I don't find any of these revealing or surprising. I think these hypotheses themselves are steeped. And now this is what I didn't expect this. This is interesting, your perspective here. Steeped in the preconceived notion that the U.S. media measures global news with an American yardstick. And it certainly does. And this is not unique to the United States. When you start, I travel a lot and spend a lot of time reading media from other countries. And even though the actions of the U.S. figure large in foreign media, the measure of those actions is very, very much the point of origin for the media. But anyhow, American yardstick, that is, the U.S. norms are used to weigh news values. The findings are then not surprising, particularly if you look at H2 through 4 of Goldman's conclusion. One stood out the most to me. He writes, one specific news value identified in the study was relevance. The result indicated the nations that are relevant to the home nation, in this case, the United States, were likely to receive coverage. To me, relevance means most like us or one from which we can benefit. Okay, that's certainly not untrue. Now, for example, next week, in these questions that you're working on, next week, the questions that you're working on right now in week 4. Jeez, what am I trying to say? Okay. One of the questions that I ask you to tackle is this criticism that the U.S. media often is too reductive in its representation of stories from abroad. Okay, taking issues that are very complex and just reducing it down to one thing. And I give you a couple of examples to look at and to say, well, yeah, I agree with that, or no, I don't agree with that. And I give you a couple of examples to consider, okay, to sort of to sort that out. But the underlying driving factor is, what's the benefit to us? Well, okay, it has this or it has none, and therefore, are we interested or not interested? Okay, and yes, that's certainly a valid observation, concerning how media works in the United States and in a lot of other countries. So, all right, good answer. Okay, everybody. So remember, group number 2, all right, for class presentations. Drop your presentations into, actually, because I think yours are due on what, the 5th of February. So it won't be this week. I will set it up. So you're going to drop them into Blackboard on week 5. All right, because week 4 is due on the 4th. So drop them in on week 5. Okay, drop them into that board. Everybody continue to work on your research paper. Okay. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me by email. I always like to hear from you. Okay, everybody. I think about you. I pray for you. Okay. And have a great, great rest of the week. And I'll see you on Blackboard. Bye-bye.